You want more trade proposals? We got more trade proposals and a lot more covering the Warriors. It's all next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, where we're currently live, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Use the promo code Locked On. You can follow Kylen Mills on all social media platforms, including Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Kylen Mills. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Twitter at Dog Surf Roadshow. Kylen, great to see you. Happy Monday, I guess. How was your weekend? How are you doing?
You're cracking me up. Monday, I guess. What day is it? We don't know. We're just here. We're talking basketball. Warriors off-season craziness has already begun. I know that we're going to talk some, blockbuster draft picks, but you also have some bad news on the salary cap situation. How's that for a teaser? But there's a lot to talk about, and that's a good thing because, there's some movement, and there's going to be some movement, I expect, for the Warriors anyway in the offseason. So we get to watch it all unfold. Looking forward to it. And we'll see.
Absolutely. Should we just dive into a few more trades that I did not get to from our Friday two-parter? All right,
sure.
So I'll save the best for last. So here are three more trade proposals. And again, you and I did an hour-plus show on Friday, split it up in two parts, covered, I thought, every trade proposal possible, imaginable. And then right when we got off the air, I was like, oh, damn it, I forgot two more, and then I thought of a third one. So I'm going to run it by you and anyone else in the chat who wants to jump in. And again, we're going live today. Trade number one, and this one doesn't excite me that much, but two reasons why I wouldn't say no to it, and I do think it would improve the Warriors, and that would be a trade with the Philadelphia 76ers, and the trade would involve sending Jordan Poole and either Gary Payton II or Jonathan Kuminga. My strong preference would be Gary Payton II, and the reason you're including the second player is to make the salaries work, and you're getting back in return Tobias Harris. He gives you size, is a bit of a defensive liability, but offensively, dude can score, smart player. Your thoughts?
I don't hate it. My biggest concern is just what the Warriors would have to give up, what they'd be taking in terms of his salary. And I know that's something we were talking about, Cyrus, before this episode opened up. Harris did sign a 5-year, $180 million contract with the 76ers, but 23-24 is the last year of the deal. And like you mentioned, I think his skill set would be a nice addition. First of all, the Warriors need size. So I think adding a big in any realm is a positive. Any type of forward is a positive for the Warriors. And then, adding someone who can score and be an offensive threat. And that's one thing that's kind of tough when you have Draymond Green either playing in the small five or playing in the forward position. Like, defenses just can totally sag off him. They don't have to respect him or honor him at all because we know Draymond Green isn't going to shoot. He struggles even to make layups. And that's, not to disrespect him, but there's no doubt his prowess is defensively, especially as his career has gone on. So it'd be nice to have a forward who could be a scoring threat. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that he could help spread the floor. I don't, like I said, I don't love it necessarily because of what the Warriors would have to give up. And I think that's my big caveat with it. Like, not that I think Harris isn't a good player, but I just think, that would be giving up a lot. I think for him, for a season, we don't know how much longer, what the future could hold. And that's my only issue. And you know how much I love Gary Payton II. We both do. And then I think Jonathan Kuminga is a player who I know we've talked about in trade discussions in our last episode, but like, I would like the Warriors to hold on to him if at all possible. Now, if there's like a blockbuster trade and like an amazing all-star who can come to the Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga has to be thrown in, like, okay, I'm one who would consider it, but like definitely would want to avoid it if possible. And I just don't know, like, long-term how much Harris would really help the Warriors. Like when you look at the big picture versus, like I said, I just feel like he's not like a one of the big stars that you're like, whoa, blockbuster trade. We absolutely got to move Jonathan Kuminga for this. I don't feel that way necessarily about him. I think Kuminga still has a lot of potential, and I don't want to, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know that I'd necessarily want to move him along with the Jordan Poole for Tobias Harris. And then same thing with Gary Payton II. I think that Gary's the better choice, like you said, over a JK, but I still like Gary Payton II in terms of bringing that perimeter defense. It's something the Warriors struggled with before he got traded back to the Warriors. He was injured, so we never really got to see him reach his full potential. Like, kind of a weird situation having to rejoin the team and like get thrown into the playoffs. He had some moments. I don't know that he was necessarily like his full self in the postseason. I don't know if you felt that way as well, Cyrus. Like,
depending on the game. Some games I saw his old
some
self.
days,
Some games,
yeah, there were some flashes of it, but like I would like to see Gary Payton II back and to see what he can do with another full season with the Warriors in the championship run. He was so effective. He was their defensive specialist. They still need a great on-ball defender, especially with Dante DiVincenzo likely leaving in the offseason. So I don't know. Given what the Warriors would have to give up, like I just don't know that I'm like super hyped about it. What do you think?
I hear you. I totally hear you. I wouldn't be, in all honesty, I'm throwing it out there largely because it's a possibility. The salaries could work. He would give
we
you
still got to
size.
talk about it. We don't have to love all the trades, but we can talk about it.
And bottom line is, if it's a trade for Poole and for Gary Payton II, I do think the Warriors would improve substantially. Because you're getting bigger. And I'll explain what I mean later in the show. But Gary Payton II, if the team finds someone out there who wants to trade for him and give back a trade exception, he's probably gone. I'm going to explain why in a moment, because the Warriors are in a massive mess when it comes to the salary cap and the penalty. I started doing research on this over the weekend, and the more I looked into it, and the more I discussed this with one of my close friends who's a Warrior insider, it just was just eye-opening. I'm like, oh my God, the Warriors have some really tough decisions to make, and there's a very strong possibility the dynasty's over, and we might either have a nostalgia tour moving forward or a transition period with Steph and Curry surrounded by a lot of up-and-comers and patchwork players. So anyways, the point is, and I'll get into this in a minute, but Gary Payton II is probably going to be a casualty of the salary cap if the team can find someone to trade a trade exception for him, meaning take his salary and give nothing back. And the other team, in order to make that work, would have to be well under the cap, not well under the cap, but under the cap to make it legally possible. But Tammy McDaniel, by the way, writes, and huge fan of the show. Thank you, Tammy, as always, for the support. She writes that Brooke Lopez, a free agent, vet minimum. Absolutely. But we're going to talk about free agents either later this week or maybe next week. But yeah, I'm not opposed to that. Absolutely. So anyways, and then Jay has the best idea, period. Build around Anthony Lamb, of course. I mean, duh. I mean, I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner. All right. So Tobias Harris is number one. Trade number two, and I'm going to share a tweet from another huge fan of the show, Nick Fensky, and I can't thank you and everyone else enough for the support. And Nick brought this up. A few other people have brought this name up as well. We didn't touch on this on Friday. I wanted to, we just had a lot going on and forgot. Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is not happy in Boston, and Nick Fensky asks, is that a possibility? He's going to make $31 million next year, but the bottom line is this: wherever he goes next, the team that acquires him is going to have to pony up real cash. Jaylen Brown wants a contract extension, so if the Warriors trade for him, they're going to have to give him that extension, and it's going to cost a lot of money because with the CBA, salaries are going up. Anyways, it's in the realm of possibility. The question is whether or not the Warriors would spend the money, whether or not Jordan Poole would just be enough. That is a player where maybe Jonathan Kuminga would have to be thrown in the mix, and maybe you get someone like Peyton Pritchard back as well. Pritchard, by the way, is a team, weirdly, the Warriors pursued this regular season as a trade possibility, and the Celtics didn't want to trade him. But your thoughts on Jaylen Brown to the Warriors?
I think that you would definitely have to throw in something besides Jordan Poole for Jaylen Brown. I mean, just given what the Celtics would want for him, I love the possibility of adding Jaylen Brown to the Warriors. The Dubs desperately need a secondary scorer, a consistent secondary scorer aside from Steph Curry. I mean, to me, looking at the postseason, like that's one of the big issues that I see. The Splash Brothers are not consistently going off on the same nights as they were in years past. Like Klay Thompson was inconsistent. He was flat out shooting bad at times in the postseason.
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins, I think at time has been the Warriors' second best player, and that's an argument many people made during the championship run. But I don't think in this last year or postseason, obviously he did take some time away from the team, but he wasn't really that a consistent secondary threat. You've got Jordan Poole, who I think a lot of people expected to fill that role, and then there obviously was some disappointment with his play in the postseason. And then he also comes with the number of issues in terms of being a liability defensively, some of the turnover problems, late game execution. So to me, this is where it would be great to add someone like a Jaylen Brown who could really be that secondary scorer. I mean, Jaylen Brown and Steph Curry, the thought of the two of them on the same team, I think is scary. I mean, Brown averages just under 27 points per game, I believe. And then he also has size, so he rebounds well. He averages nearly 7 boards per game, 3.5 assists. He's a good shooter in general anyway, from the floor anyway. Could definitely work on the 3-point shooting, but that's what you got Steph for. So you don't need that. He's got a little bit of a different skill set. And so I would love the idea of adding him. I just think, I don't know. Do you really think the Celtics would do it? I definitely know that there's going to be discussions, or at least that, as you mentioned, there are reports out that he's unhappy. He may request a trade, but like, is this going to be a situation similar to Kevin Durant where, the Brooklyn Nets tried to talk him out of, initially he requested the trade and they're like, we're not going to give him up for anything. No one was offering what the Nets were happy with. And so they ended up kind of hoping that the time would pass. They'd be able to talk him back into staying. And they were able to do that. Because from what I'm understanding, Cyrus, the trade rumors are just coming from the fact that Jaylen Brown might request a trade. I don't know that the Celtics would be looking to trade him. Correct me if I'm wrong, because he does still have another year on his deal. And I don't know that Boston's necessarily wanting to give him up. From my understanding, it's more so that he may feel underappreciated, or he may be unhappy and be requesting a trade. So it's not necessarily going to happen. Is that your understanding?
When we come back, I'm going to explain why I think Jaylen Brown is going to get moved this offseason.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'll explain why in just a minute. I agree with Tammy McDaniel, who also wrote that as well. And then there's one more trade, which I don't know if it's going to excite people, but it's actually weirdly the one that I would want the most. And I'm going to explain what that trade is in just a moment, and so much more, because we also have to talk about the Warriors salary cap situation, which could make all of these trade discussions completely moot. I'll explain what I'm talking about in just a minute. But first, got to give some love to PrizePicks. Again, it's all about daily fantasy made fun and easy. And if you're in California legal, it's all about betting on over-unders of players. Like tonight, for example, we're recording this during the Nuggets-Lakers game, and I'm guessing Nikola Jokic had some interesting over-unders. You could have also bet with PrizePicks on a combined total of points, rebounds, and assists. And the spectrum isn't just the NBA. It's all across sports, Major League Soccer, Major League Baseball, when the NFL is in season, NHL. You can mix and match the athletes you bet on. And you can win money. You can win up to 25 times your money betting on 2 to 6 players and their projections. So go check it out. It's super fun. It's super easy. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 if you use the promo code Locked On. Again, put in $100. They'll give you $100. You can play with $200 to start. And if you don't have $100, whatever you put in, they will match it. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For the everydayers, I don't know yet who the guest is for tomorrow's show, but on Thursday, Eric Pincus is coming on the program, a cap expert. I'm super excited to pick his brain. And tweet at us if you have any questions for Eric. I'll definitely get to it. And of course, follow Kylen Mills on all social media platforms at Kylen Mills, whether it's Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Tammy McDaniel, you are so kind for saying that we are the best Warriors live stream show. It's a fact. It's not an opinion. That's an actual fact. Tammy, who's Dan? I don't know. Oh, never mind. That's from another show. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so Kylen, here's trade number 3, and this could be literally a straight up trade. Jordan Poole for Julius Randle. Now, Randle was, I think he made the third team All-NBA this year. He's got some issues. It's not a perfect trade, but what he gives you is size. What he gives you is offense. And what I think the Warriors could do with Julius Randle is what they did with Andrew Wiggins. Take a player who has a lot of potential. Maybe that potential is not tapped in that environment, and bring him into the Warriors and bring out the best in him. He would be your starting center immediately. Again, he can shoot the three. Your thoughts?
Wait, time out. You said Julius Randle has issues. I'm just curious. What are the issues that you're thinking of? I have something in mind, but
He complains a lot. He gets disgruntled.
yeah, the body
He's kind of
language thing.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, interesting. I was just curious if you had something to point out in his game because I've got a little bit of a take on that. So I think New York Knicks, Julius Randle to the Warriors would be a good move for the Warriors for a number of reasons. First, you're bringing in size, which is something the Warriors struggled with all season. They were small, and it ended up hurting them in the postseason. Randle is 6'8". He can shoot fairly well, and he can help spread the floor because he is about a 34% three-point shooter. At least he was during this last regular season, and spreading the floor is critical to the Warriors' motion offense. He's also very skillful. He's an all-star forward. He could be a secondary scorer behind Steph. Randle averaged more than 25 points per game during the regular season. 46 and 34 were his shooting percentages. Now, here's my issue with Julius Randle. He is a player who has historically disappeared in the postseason, at least in his two postseason experiences in 2020, 2021, and then this current postseason. This postseason in 2023, he averaged 16.6 points per game through those two series against the Cavs and against the Heat. He shot 37% from the floor and just 25% from three. So it's painful to look at the drop off in those numbers. It was a similar story also in 2021. Average 18 points per game during the postseason, just 29.8% from the floor. Averaged 24 points per game during the regular season. So what gives the massive drop-off in playoff performance for Julius Randle? That's my biggest concern, in addition to something you mentioned, Cyrus, which is some of the maybe attitude, body language concerns, some of the reports around that. But my question is Julius Randle a regular season player? That's something that there's been a lot of chatter about in, the sports talk and sports radio world and things like that. The Warriors already had to deal with Jordan Poole, which is why he's received a lot of criticism, is for essentially disappearing in the postseason after playing well during the regular season for a lot of stretches. Now, Jordan Poole has his issues. We've already addressed, his defense, some of the turnovers, but he was still a scorer during the regular season and added a spark off the bench or in the starting lineup when he had to fill in at times. And then he just was not good during the postseason. So I guess my only concern with a Julius Randle trade would be we need him to show up in the playoffs. This is a team going after a championship. The Dubs can't have Julius Randle disappearing and shooting 29% in the postseason if they want to win a championship, and they're going to bring him in to be, like I said, just that secondary scorer behind Steph. He's someone who has to show up. And to me, it's just been such an issue for the Warriors, as we were just talking about in the previous trades. Like, the Warriors have to get more support for Steph. Like, that's one of my biggest things, in addition to size. They need size. And I just personally think Steph needs more help in the offensive production because so many of the pieces around him were just inconsistent this year. Like I said, Jordan Poole was good at times, bad at times in the postseason. Klay Thompson was great at times, bad in the postseason a lot of the times. And it's like, you can't have that. And then, like I said, Andrew Wiggins, I feel like maybe is more consistent, but I just, he still didn't consistently put up big numbers, didn't quite have as dominant performances as he did last postseason. Then, Kevon Looney, great on the boards, but just, not an offensive center. Draymond Green, not an offensive threat. So it's like, who's going to be that consistent secondary scorer behind Steph? That's one of my questions about the Warriors going into next season. I like Julius Randle for that, but then he also has to contribute in the postseason to the same level. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, no matter who the Warriors make a trade with, there's going to be a level of risk, right?
For sure.
Now, Julius Randle is a 25-10 player. Again, he brings you size. He can be the number 2 scorer. One thing that he would have with the Warriors that he didn't have with the Knicks is help. Like, he would have other players around him who can deviate pressure that I think he was facing playing with the Knicks, because he was the number 2 option behind Jalen Brunson, but it wasn't like the third option was outstanding if Julius Randle had a bad game. And the reason why, like J. Dodd writes, why would the Knicks want Poole? Julius Randle is going to be moved. It would shock me if he wasn't. And they already have Mitchell Robinson as their center. They don't really need two bigs. Jordan Poole would give Jalen Brunson some relief in terms of scoring, in terms of ball handling. And Jordan Poole, for some reason, his trade value is high right now. So the Knicks could be a possibility for that. And Randle, again, I also love what G Dot wrote, that he can be sunned up by Draymond and fit great as a scoring big. I agree.
I agree for sure. I agree on that. Did you see Trae Young's comment though? And Trae Young is listening to our podcast. Did you know that Julius Randle trade is basically trading Jordan Poole for Jordan Poole?
No,
I'm not 100% with that. I'm not 100% with that, Trae.
No, that's ridiculous. I mean, they're completely different players. It's like night and day. Because the thing is that Jordan Poole is redundant to a certain degree with this Warriors team. You need size. I mean, he's a tough player as well. I don't know. I wouldn't mind it. Looking at the landscape, when you look at all the options, I'd say sign me up for Julius Randle if that's a trade. All right. So now here's the bad news. All right. And we don't have to go to another break, so we can just keep rolling here. The Golden State Warriors are in salary cap hell. And
brace yourself, Stub Nation.
Yeah, this isn't going to be a fun
Serenity now for any of my Seinfeld fans. Serenity now.
And in all honesty, I would love the chat to jump in. This is where your perspective will be helpful. So the Golden State, so Joe Lacob has already said that he doesn't want to spend over $400 million annually on payroll. The way the Warriors are set up right now, Stephen Curry next year is going to make $52 million. Klay Thompson is going to make $43 million. Jordan Poole, if he stays with the Warriors, is going to make $28 million. Draymond Green, let's say for the sake of argument, he either takes the player option or he signs an extension that pays an amount identical to the player option this year, because he's not going to take a pay cut. So let's say Draymond gets 25 next year. Andrew Wiggins is slated to make 24. Gary Payne II is going to make $8.7 million. Kevon Looney is going to make $7.5 million. Jonathan Kuminga is going to make $6 million. Moses Moody is going to make $3.9 million. Patrick Baldwin Jr., $2.3 million. Ryan Rollins, $1.8. So that is, I believe, 11 players, meaning the Warriors are going to add 3 more. One of those could be the number 19 pick in the draft. The other 2 could be veteran minimum deals. But the point is, with that lineup I just presented, the Warriors are going to spend approximately $490 million next year, just shy of $500 million in payroll. So when we're talking about all these trades, and and it's really fun to have these discussions, and some people, look, they want Jordan Poole even to stay. But the bottom line, and this is where I'm asking the chat, and Kylen, I'm asking you, will the Warriors spend over $400 million next year?
My answer is no. And I think it's super, super concerning. Someone's going to have to take a pay cut for the Warriors to keep any semblance of this team in place. The Warriors front office has been pretty upfront in the last couple of years, and just being in some of the post game and postseason press conferences, that they need to keep the salary cap and the luxury taxes under control. They can't just spend and spend and spend and spend, which is something that I think Warriors fans have become accustomed to. I mean, in terms of payroll and in regards to the rest of the league, the Warriors are, the top end. And it's a reason why they've won some of these championships. But at the same time, I've heard Bob Myers talk about it. I've heard him deliver messages from Joe Lacob himself saying that, listen, we can't just be spending endlessly. We can't just be going crazy into the luxury tax. It's just not feasible. I will say, I think it was disappointing in terms of the new contract that was negotiated recently, that there wasn't something in there addressing players that the team drafted themselves.
Yes.
And I do believe there should be a luxury tax cut. I know that both you and I are an exception. I know both you and I, Cyrus, have been on the same page about that, but I just think it's unfortunate the Warriors are in the situation when you're looking at players that they brought in and developed themselves and turned into these high value and high dollar players. And now they have to watch them walk away because they can't afford to keep them, or because they're being taxed so heavily. I just think it's an entirely unfortunate situation. In terms of that number, though, I just don't see the Warriors spending it. I don't know what your thoughts are, but just like I said, based on everything I've heard from the front office, everything I've heard from what they've said, in front of people, what anything that you hear in terms of conversations behind closed doors, like, I don't think they're willing to break that threshold.
Yeah. And for people asking, yeah, this will be the highest amount they would ever pay if they kept everyone back. Rich Dub proposes, for example, trade them for picks and cheaper vets. Can't do that. See, the issue is you have to match salaries. They have to come within, I think, 75%, or I can't remember. Kyle, I don't know if you remember, Kylen, if it's 75% or 90%. It might even be 90%. But the point is they have to match. They have to come
Yeah, I know what
close
you're
to
talking about.
matching.
I don't remember the exact number, but yes, it has to
So you
match.
can't you can't, for example, just trade Jordan Poole for someone who makes half what he makes. Can't do that. That's not an option. So the only two options you have is either pony up the cash, or you trade Jordan Poole, and or Gary Payton II, and you trade them for nothing. You trade them to teams like the Spurs, like the Magic, like the Rockets, who are under the cap. Because if you're under the salary cap, you can trade back what's called a trade exception. This is a number that matches whatever it is you traded for. And then the team that gets that trade exception can basically use that dollar amount to add a free agent, right? But that would defeat the purpose of saving money. So the Warriors, what's could happen, and this is what I'm really dreading, but unfortunately this might be the reality of things, is they're probably, or at least maybe, going to be trading Jordan Poole and or Gary Payton II for nothing, for trade exceptions that they're not going to use. And this is where I feel like you're if you're the Golden State Warriors, you have a really tough a decision to make here. And the question is, do you continue on with the core? Now, Steph's obviously not going anywhere. Steph is still one of the best players in the game, but Klay Thompson has clearly regressed. Draymond Green is still very serviceable, but he's not the player he once was. Like, he's not the guy that will shut literally anyone down, and he just doesn't have the impact he once did. I mean, we have to face reality. He is regressing, just fortunately not at the same rate as Klay Thompson. So the conundrum here is, do you keep this core? Do you maintain nostalgia for the next 3 years? And in the process, are no longer a world championship contender? You might still be a playoff team, but you're not winning titles anymore. Or do you follow the owner that I respect more than anyone else in all sports, which is Eddie DeBartolo, who would move on before the player had regressed to the point of no value, and keep this thing going? Meaning, like, do you trade Klay as soon as this year? Do you tell Dre, adios? Or if he signs to that player option, do you then trade him after that? This is a massive issue that the Warriors are facing, and I hate that I came to this realization this weekend. And like MVP JB, for example, writes, the Warriors will be back in the finals next year with Curry, Klay, and Dre. That's wishful thinking. I mean, what do you base that on, given what we saw this offseason? So that's where we are. Your thoughts, Kylen?
This is a massive inflection point in the history of the Golden State Warriors. I don't think there's any way, and everything I'm hearing is that this front office is not going to spend more than $400 million, the highest salary they ever would spend, or the highest they would ever spend on player salaries next season. I don't think there's any way that's happening. And that begs the question, what happens to this core? What will happen to Klay, Dre, and Steph? To me, based on everything I've heard and the Warriors have talked, I don't think they're a team that's going to break up the core before the absolute last possible chance.
Yeah.
So I don't know they're necessarily going to trade Klay Thompson in the offseason. I don't think that's going to happen. I do expect them to offer an extension to Draymond Green, but I think the reality is Draymond is not going to get the max extension that he reportedly wants and has previously, been out there in the media. He's going to have to take a pay cut. Other players are going to have to take pay cuts. Like, that's the bottom line if the Warriors want to keep any semblance of this core together. Now, like you mentioned, though, that means that likely Jordan Poole is going to have to be gone. Someone else is going to have to be gone. There still are going to have to be other moving pieces. But if you're talking about strictly Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, I don't expect to see those three move. Now, you also have to keep in mind that Steph has to sign off on anything that happens within this front office, at least a big move within this front office. Bob Myers, Joe Lacob, Steve Kerr have all addressed the fact that Steph Curry has a very large voice in the decisions that are made around this organization because he is the superstar that has built this Golden State Warriors brand. He has a massive say. Would he be okay with the Warriors trading Klay in the offseason, not offering Draymond an extension? I don't think so. Steph Curry is super loyal. Those three are super close. They talked about it all during this year and last year during the championship run. Those three still sit together on the team planes. They sit together on the buses. They just talk life. Beyond basketball, they're super close. So I just don't know that I see Steph Curry being okay with a Klay Thompson trade as early as this offseason and not
Agreed.
offering Draymond Green an extension. Now, that being said, I mentioned I don't think they can afford to offer Draymond what he probably wants. Will Draymond stay without getting a max extension? That's a question that needs to be asked. If he's smart, I think he will. I think the Warriors core definitely could try to run it back and challenge for a championship, but this front office is going to have to get very creative to find the right pieces to put around them. It's going to be really, really tough given this salary cap situation, the luxury tax situation. It is definitely not an easy fix. So I don't know what that fix is, Cy, but I don't expect to see the big three move. I expect there to be a lot of other movements, but then the question remains, how do you get the pieces in place to make this a championship contender without going back into the luxury tax and
Mm-hmm.
for
Impossible.
racking up the
Impossible.
bill? How is it even possible? So I guess, it's a tough point. I just don't see the Warriors organization breaking up the core three just because of a dollar amount. Like, I just feel like people would freak out. I don't know what would happen. Um, I don't know what the answer is, though. I guess that's my thing. I don't know what the answer is because we saw this season was proof. The Warriors' top 6 players from the 2022 championship team returned, and it wasn't enough to win
Mm-hmm.
another championship. So, like, Klay, Steph, and Draymond aren't enough by themselves to be a championship contender. Like, there has to be an improvement in the roster. But how do you improve the roster without spending money? Do you have the answer, Cyrus? Because I don't.
No, I mean, the one thing I would say is, I mean, this Warriors ownership group is filthy rich. I mean, they could afford to spend a $500 million, but realistically, pragmatically, they're probably not going to do it. Again, it pains me to say this. It really does. Like, I love Klay Thompson, literally, not like sports. I love the man. What he's brought to this organization, who he is as a person, absolutely love him. With that said, if the choice is Klay or someone younger, I'm going to go with someone younger. I want this thing to keep going. And if they keep Klay, yeah, this is the beginning of the end. Jacob Pena writes, and I have a few chat questions here I want to address before we wrap things up for both of us. Jacob Pena writes, your thoughts on Kerr's comments about Klay not going to be coming off the bench? That sucks. I don't think Klay is worthy of being a starter anymore, but when did he say that? I actually didn't see that recently, but I would personally
A
love him
while
coming
ago.
off the
I
bench.
don't know that he said it recently, but I think way back when Kerr made those comments, I didn't see any comment like that recently, but it's possible.
Yeah, same. Mark Graves writes, Jordan Poole for Miles Turner and Duarte with the Pacers. I'd say yes to that, but I don't know if the Pacers would. It's a possibility, but the Pacers did just recently give Miles Turner a contract extension. And my understanding is they don't want to move him, but and MVP JV writes, Klay will be good next year. Let's hope. Let's hope. Now, one thing that I did like that Kerr called him out publicly in terms of his offseason conditioning, I do think that impacted him this year. He needs to slim down. He does. It's not like he got fat, but I think he could be 5-10 pounds lighter. When you become an older player, you don't want to add weight. You need to get lean because all that extra mass is just putting stress on your joints and on your ligaments, and it's just not a wise thing to do. So I do think he works out this offseason and hopefully comes back better. We'll see. Some pinned messages, Kylen, before we wrap things up. Rich Dub writes, if Steph realizes the team needs to cut money, does he ask to be traded? You first, Kylen.
I don't think so. I don't think Steph Curry's going to ask to be traded. He's a loyal guy. I don't see him leaving the Golden State Warriors unless the Warriors massively fumbled the bag in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that they need to cut money and they're literally on the verge of having the highest, salary cap and paying the most amount ever. I mean, I don't see him asking to be traded if they're like, hey, listen, we want to offer Dre an extension, but we got to give him a pay cut. I think that Steph Curry's going to understand the conundrum that they're in, but I think he's a loyal guy. I think Steph Curry retires a Warrior. I think the organization is going to make sure it happens. And at this point in his career, I don't know there would be a benefit of going somewhere else for him. He has cemented a legacy with the Golden State Warriors. I really hope that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and then Rich Dub also asked, and if I follow this question correctly, would that work with a team that is under the cap and get trade exceptions. Yes, the Warriors could get a trade exception back. Notably, they did it a few years ago when they traded Andre Iguodala to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Mhm.
I think they did that move to create cap space for Andrew Wiggins. So that, or was it for D'Angelo Russell? I can't remember. I think they did that move so that they could do a sign and trade, because you can't make
It
sign
was
and trades if you're
complicated.
over the
Yeah.
cap, right? So
Mhm.
yes, so you still can make that work. Anything else in the chat you see, Kylen, before we wrap
The only
things
thing I
up?
wanted to say is that shout out to AC made a comment and said the Heat ran it back with their whack roster and they almost in the finals. So hey, why couldn't the
True,
Warriors run it back with their whack roster this
true,
season?
yeah,
That just made me laugh. That just made me laugh.
no, but it's a
But
great point, because they both finished with
you know,
44 wins this year. To me, that's a sign of coach that, like, Eric Spoelstra is such a good coach, and
he
Pat
is.
Riley is a genius. Yeah, props to them. I love them. I agree. Right? What do you
The
think?
Warriors, yeah, no, I just love that. All these whack rosters out here. The Heat with their whack roster are, potentially going to the NBA Finals. So who knew? Who knew? Maybe
And
the
and
Warriors could pull
and
off the same thing. But that being said, do you think Steve Kerr has it in him to coach the F out of this team next season, to where if they did run it back with the same whack roster, he could pull off Spoelstra? That's a question that remains to be answered.
my answer is no to that. That's me. Rich Dub also adds a sign and trade if you over the cap leads to a hard cap. Yeah, yes. If you commit a sign and trade, the team that is involved in that trade, it then falls under the hard cap, but you have to be under it to begin with to do the sign and trade, which is why the Warriors, that will not be an option for them this off season. I want to end the show on this note, on a positive note. There was a story that was published either today or yesterday about Bob Myers. We're still waiting on the decision whether or not he's going to come back, and I really hope he does, because the Warriors have some tough waters to navigate, and I'd much rather have the captain of the ship, who's been there, continuing to lead them through this, instead of saying sayonara, and then I don't know what the hell the Warriors are going to do then. But there was a story where Bob Myers talked about meeting Larry Smith. Larry Smith was an undersized center for the Golden State Warriors in the 80s. And I think early 90s. He had the nickname Mr. Mean. He was such an effective, dominant rebounder. I'll never forget him. He was just his presence inside. You couldn't move him. If the ball was anywhere near him, he was getting the rebound. He posted phenomenal numbers. But the reason why I bring that story up is because I knew Bob Myers is from the Bay Area. He went to Monte Vista High School in Danville. And he went to UCLA after that eventually, and then became an agent. But I did not know that he was a big Warriors fan, and until I read that article. And the article talks about how, there was, Myers delved into comparing Looney to Larry Smith, Looney being another unbelievable rebounder for the Warriors. But the fact that Myers is the GM of a team he grew up loving, that gives me some hope and some optimism he stays. Or am I being delusional, Kyle? And your final thoughts?
I think that he could possibly stay, but I had heard that before, and Bob Myers has mentioned that before, at least out and about, just that the Warriors are a team that he grew up cheering on. Maybe that helps the chances, that tugs the heartstrings, but who knows? Because the reports that are out there that it's family that's the big focus right now for him. So if he does step away, I understand it.
Yeah, I hear you. And that is I guess the good news in all this is, if he does step away, it's not going to be because he's going to a competitor. He's probably just going to step away and do like media ventures, just kick back. He's got enough money to last him for like 10 lifetimes. He's got a beautiful family, but let's hope he stays. I mean, he's a great guy, and he's also has a brilliant basketball mind. So I guess we'll do another show Wednesday, correct, Kylen?
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
all
I'll
right?
be here
So
Wednesday.
and we'll find out. Follow the program on Twitter at Locked On Dubs to find out tomorrow's schedule and the schedule in general. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, Kylen, of course. And I guess we'll be back soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye.